Cheryl Hodges. I'm a botanical artist. I live in Jerrabomberra, just near Canberra. Although I've been painting botanical watercolours now for over 20 years, my background is not in botany. So I generally learn about plants as I'm painting them. Recently, I've been making a concerted effort to learn more about the local species in my area. So I've been doing a lot of walking, a lot of observing, research online, asking friends and experts, just to try and identify some of these local species that I see all the time and I don't really recognise what they are. Then it occurred to me that other people might enjoy doing the same thing. So what I'm doing is I'm putting together, hopefully, a group of videos where we'll be learning about the plant, learning how to identify the plant, but then also we'll be sketching and painting the plant. I'm going to be painting in a sketchbook style, so this is suitable for complete beginners. You don't have to have any expensive materials, you can just use whatever you have. Just a pencil and a piece of paper is enough to start. This is not intended to be a framed work of art, it's just something that we can refer back to learn more about the plant and enjoy the process as we go. The first plant that I'm going to focus on is the red box, or Eucalyptus polyanthemos. They're very common around here, they're beautiful, they're quite distinctive. So hopefully, if you have some red box near you, you might be able to grab a specimen and take it home and get to work. Join me while we paint this in a relaxed sketchbook style. But if you don't have red box near you, I think that you'll still learn something from this and you might be able to apply these skills to painting a different species of eucalyptus. So now I'll show you some footage of the red box, followed by a fun drawing and painting project. Thanks for joining me. This is a red box. The botanical name is Eucalyptus polyanthemos. You can see the bark is rough and flaky at the base of the trunk and smoother as you move up to the branches. This is pretty variable amongst the species. The leaf shape is quite distinctive, quite rounded and a beautiful blue-grey colour. And here we actually have some flowers. They're quite small, typical sort of eucalyptus flowers. And here are some of the buds. So they're a little bit glaucous, a bit of a glaucous coating on them, as do the leaves. I've just moved to a different tree just to show you the juvenile growth, and the leaves are quite rounded and glaucous. And I've also found some of the mature fruit here as well. Again, pretty small. I've gathered some pieces of the Eucalyptus polyanthemos. So I've got just some leaves here. Here I've got some buds and I do have some flowers, and I've just popped them into a vase because they'll wilt really quickly. And then I also found some lovely juvenile growth, again in that heart shape. They're not always heart shaped, but I do like them, and I love the colouring in this particular one, and also some of the fruit. So this is firstly, this is a very casual video and usually my work is quite detailed, and it can take me anywhere from 20 to say 100 hours to do a fully detailed big painting. What I'm aiming at today is I just want to get to know the plant. So this is more of a sketchbook. So I haven't used this before, so it's quite daunting actually doing the first drawing in here. This is actually a Stillman burn. It's a smooth surface and it's 270 GSM. So the paper is quite thick and should be able to take a bit of watercolor. The paper that I usually use is 300 GSM, so that's not too different. So just going to work out a bit of a composition here. I think I'll probably just put some leaves sort of coming down here, and I might put my juvenile one at the bottom, and then I can have some the buds and the fruit and the flowers up the top here somewhere. I don't want to be too pedantic about this. I just want to get the job done today. And then this could be something that I can refer back to, either to do a larger, more detailed painting, or just to look back through, you know, my journeys through the local area and identifying local plants. So what I actually think I need to do is start with the flower. Now with eucalyptus flowers, often they're very small and often they're cream, so they're a little tricky, but we'll just start with the drawing. Now I'm going to start with that because they're the ones that are going to change the quickest. Everything else will, you know, keep its shape for a few days, but these flowers will change quite quickly. And I also take photographs at an early stage. So there's some buds on there too. I'm just going to pull this off so it's easier to actually look at here. So, oh look, this one's got a little cap about to come off. That's very cute. But look, I might just start by drawing one flower. These things can take forever. Just get my pencil. So I might just pop the flowers up here. I'm just using a 2H to sketch. This is kind of how I would start sketching for a normal painting, but really if you're after information on how I do my real paintings and my detailed paintings, I do have some online tutorials, so you can go to my website to find the links to those. But at the moment I'm just using a 2H, and so you can sort of you know, you can look at different directions of the flower. So the easiest way to paint it is if the flower's facing away from you, like this one here. So I'm just going to paint one sort of facing down, and so those little stamens, there are some sort of coming out that way, and then there's some coming straight out. So just roughly get those in. And I'll paint some a little bit later as well, but at the moment just a drawing, just a rough drawing. I'm trying not to be too pedantic here. Now I'm just going to pop these little anthers on the end here. I am in lockdown and I have children at home, so if you hear some noises, it could be my children talking or arguing or asking for lunch. Right, okay. Now, I might just quickly if I can get the right angle, I might just sketch one coming straight at me, which is tricky, but look, you know, this doesn't have to be a masterpiece. That's what I'm telling myself anyway. Okay, and you have little stamens in the middle, and then larger stamens going out, and there's a lot of them. Okay, and again, there's, probably can't see, but those little anthers are quite dark, which helps define the stamens, because the filaments are quite light, so it's good to have those little dark patches at the end. And then in the center is a little stigma, and it's green around the outside of that. I'm just going to put that in as a shadow. It's not a very easy angle to draw, or to for the eye to sort of comprehend. Right, I think I'm just going to leave that at the moment. So I've just popped those flowers back into a little bit of water. Now, I hope that wasn't too daunting. It's not easy to start with the flowers. But now I think we'll move on to some leaves. So look, you know, this is a very gnarled, eaten leaf. You can paint that. This has got a bit of, I don't know, something on the end of it. Not very attractive. It's good to include a few of those little imperfections, but you don't want too many of them. So I'm sort of thinking I might have these leaves coming down the page like this. So what I'll do is I'll just move them over to the side. And look, you can measure. Don't be afraid to measure, because, you know, it's good to get it right. And you can measure the width, and sometimes these mid-ribs are in the center, but sometimes, particularly with some of the juvenile growth, they can be off-center. So, you know, that's okay too. Just try and paint something that's sort of typical of the plant. I generally try not to paint any sort of freaks of nature, but then if that's what you want to do, that's okay too. Right, now what I'm doing now is I'm actually sketching very lightly with a 2B, and just really lightly to just work out my sort of map here of what I'm doing. Okay, and I'm going to draw that mid-rib in. I'm kind of roughly lining up with where I have the leaf sitting. And so this distance here, you know, some of these are important for the identification of the plant. So, and this is all about observing. So I'm just going to start by just doing some sketches, and then we will add some paint afterwards. You don't have to paint the whole thing. You don't have to paint it at all. You could just have a tonal drawing. Okay, and then we've got another leaf. There's another one sort of coming off again. Just look at that distance and where they're coming off. So don't make them opposite if they are actually alternate coming off the stem. All about observing, really paying attention, getting to know this beautiful plant. Okay, so that leaf is going to come off there. That leaf's going behind, so I'm just going to show where that's coming off, and for the moment I'm going to move on to the leaves that are coming in front. Okay, so we sort of hit a bit of a junction here, and I've got a leaf coming down this way, and I might actually have it curving this way so that they're not exactly parallel, just to make it a little bit more of a pleasing composition. So I'll have it, I might stop it about there.
And again, take note of the shape of the leaf as it's coming off. I mean, it doesn't have to be an exact replica, you know, look at all the different leaves, look at the different shapes. Just make sure that what you're doing is kind of accurate for the plant. It comes down to a little point there. It's quite cute. Okay. The edges are a little bit wobbly on the leaf, so that's good. You don't have to have a steady hand. And now this section comes off here. Looks like there was probably another leaf or maybe some buds coming off there. And you can either put those in or don't worry about it. Okay, and this one's got a nice curve on it. And a little eaten bit. So just pretend that that line's continuing there so that you know where to come back out again. If you're taking part of that out, it's eaten along the bottom there. Now I'm noticing that the top of this leaf, see, that's coming down a little bit lower. So I'm going to include that. So I've got the midrib there and that edge is coming off a bit lower. Okay, there's another little eaten section here. Make sure that's coming down. Another little eaten section. Well, it kind of worked out. That's okay. Now back to this one behind. Now that I've got this one in front, I can put it in. So I'll just work out, where do I want that? Probably maybe something like that. And how far down? I'll come out that way. Okay. Move that a bit. Okay. All right, I think that'll probably do. There is another one here. I could add that in. I do have a little bit of a problem with there only being 4, but yeah, okay, all right, I'll add it and I'll just carry that up there. I don't have to paint it. I could leave some of these as just pencil, so I'll see how I go. There's no right or wrong, just playing, and it's only for us. It doesn't have to be shown to anybody else. It's just for our own enjoyment and our own reference. That's a very tricky little curl there, so I think I'll leave that out, but I'll just I'll have that going in there because I can see that that happens. Okay. All right. Now, although I've said that, you know, this is rough and it's sketchy, this is one thing that I do when I am sketching. I'm actually just going to put this ruler here to keep that page down. So this is a really handy trick. So because I've done this quite lightly in the 2B, if I now use my 2H, so the 2B is quite a soft pencil. Now if I use my 2H and I'm going to go over this line now a little bit, pressing a little bit harder. See, I've sort of got sketchy lines here. I want this now to be a definite line. I think I'll just bring that in a little bit more there. Just change that up a bit. And follow that line. Now I do also want to put in the other side of the vein. I don't want it to be too thick though, be careful of that. It does start quite wide there and then goes down to being quite narrow. So I might even fade it out towards the bottom. All right, and now I have a kneadable eraser. And this is really good for getting rid of, so it's going to take off that 2B line that was underneath, and it's just leaving the 2H. So I've got a definite outline, and honestly the 2B would make this quite a messy page because it smudges. And you know, as soon as you start and when you start working with paint, it will actually dirty the paint. So if you don't want to do it this way, if you only want to put one initial line on there, then I would start off straight away with a 2H. So I'll probably speed this up in the video because I'm just doing the same thing for every leaf. And you know what I'm doing. Okay, so I hope that you can see now that we have a really nice outline here that we can paint. I'll just talk really quickly about paints. I don't want to go into this too much. I'm assuming that the people watching will have varying levels of ability and experience. So I'm just going to quickly touch on what I use just for those who want to know. You don't have to use these brands, you don't have to use these colours, but if you are looking for the colours that I use, I'll just let you know. I try to keep it to about 7 or 8 colours. Just to keep it simple. So although I do have a lot of different colours in my palette, I'm going to try and keep it to those colours. So I usually use Winsor & Newton. I do use artists' watercolour paints, but you know, whatever you have, I'm sure is fine for this project. So I use French ultramarine. So I use a warm and a cool of each colour. So French ultramarine and cerulean blue. Then I use Winsor lemon and Winsor yellow. Then in the reds I use Scarlet Lake and Permanent Rose and Burnt Sienna. And I also use a white, so I do use Permanent White Gouache, or sometimes I use Titanium White. And we might actually use that here. I try not to use it too often when I'm doing my traditional botanical painting, but for this project, I think some of these veins would benefit from some white. Okay, so for this colour, I've actually mixed up some cerulean blue, and you may not be able to see the palette properly, but I think it's more important that you see this, the work here. So I've mixed up cerulean blue with some Winsor yellow and then a touch of burnt sienna. This is a very, very bluey green, but it's also quite earthy, as most of our eucalypts are. I did say, I did mention the glaucous coating, that it's not too obvious on the buds, but look, if I have a leaf here, if I just rub it, you can see that some of that coating comes off and it brings out a brighter green underneath. So that can happen if birds are rubbing up against it, or, you know, so you can put a little bit of variation in like that if you like. But so we're working with a nice bluey green. So now I'm just trying to think. I think I will put I'm going to write the name of my plant across the top. And so what I might do is I might have a little patch down the bottom where I will try, I'll sample my colours. So I've mixed up this sort of bluey green, and I'll just pop a little patch down here. Okay, I tend to work quite light and build up my layers. The other thing that's really handy is just to have a little cloth nearby, just to dab your brush on. So I'm going to try not to do that too much here. I don't want to mess around with too many layers. I'm going to try and go on fairly dark and heavy, which is, as I said, is not my usual style, but for this sketchbook style, we really just want to get some painting done. Okay, I think I'm going to work on these first 3 leaves here. I'll start on this side so that then I don't have to put my hand where I've already painted. All right, so I'm just going to go straight onto the dry paper. Just tidy up that edge. Look, I'm being pedantic. I keep saying that I shouldn't be, and I am. I can't help myself. All right, this is a size 6 brush. It's a Raphael. It's a beautiful brush, holds a lot of water, and it has a reasonable tip. It is good if you can get a brush that has a nice tip. As I get into a more detailed area, I will go down in my brush size. A 6 is probably the biggest that I would usually use. All right, now the blues do granulate as well, so the colours might separate a little bit on here, but I think that will actually be a really nice effect on these eucalyptus leaves. Okay, I've got a bit too much. I'm just going to dab it off on my cloth. Yeah, there's going to be, because it's so wet, there is going to be quite a bit of granulation here. So we'll see what sort of effects that gives us. Oh, and there's a little bit of cerulean that hasn't quite dissolved in there. Oh, that's going to be very interesting. Okay, I'll move over to the other side. I don't want to fiddle too much while it's wet either. Oh, now this is going on a lot better. It's a lot more blended. I also don't usually have my pencil outlines quite so dark, but again, this is to sort of reflect this sketchbook sort of style. So I'm going to try again not to be too pedantic about those little edges, because you can see the pencil line there anyway. Okay, again, I'm just dabbing a bit more colour in there. Because it's quite wet, it will spread and blend. Oh, that's really pretty. The colour is probably a little bit too bright. I might come back over and have to dull that down a bit. Right, now I'll just see if I add a bit more burnt sienna to that, and maybe a little more cerulean. Just change that colour up a little, and let's see. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll move on to another leaf. This one here. So I'm just avoiding that mid-rib because it's quite light, so I can pop it in later. I'm just sort of painting up to that edge. Just pop a bit more paint back in there, darken it up a little, and move to the other side. I do like this paper. This is the first painting that I've done in this book, and I wasn't sure if I would like the surface, but it is easier with smooth paper to get detail, so I do have a rough one as well. That will probably be, I'll probably be doing slightly looser works in that. But look, don't worry too much about any of that. I think for this, it's just about the process and learning. This is really interesting. Probably a little too bright with all that blue, but I do like it. It's a nice effect. Okay, and I'm going to mix up some more. I never tend to mix up enough paint. And if you're really pedantic, some people use a different brush to do their mixing because it can be quite hard on the brush. Okay, let's see what that colour's looking like. Yeah, that's even a bit darker green. I really need to try to not use quite so much water. Okay, let's see how that goes. Also, feel free to turn your page around if you need to get a better angle for your brush strokes. All right. Now, I think I'm going to have to let all that dry for a little bit now. That's going to be quite wet. So I'll come back. Okay, I've let this dry now, and I'm hopefully zoomed in a little bit more. It's interesting with the paint separating and granulating. These colours look almost the same, and they've got a little brown border, and certainly the cerulean has separated from the yellow, so that's quite tricky. Right, so what I've done now, I'm going to go over the top of these with another coat. This time I've mixed up a French ultramarine with Windsor yellow. This is probably going to look quite dark here, but you can see that, you know, the colour's pretty close. If I just dab some of that paint back out and make it a lighter colour, you know, I think so. What I'm going to do now is use this It's very watery. Hopefully you can just see that at the top right of the screen there. It's quite watery. And we're just going to put a glaze over the top. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention is that when you are using so much water, the paper will buckle. It looked quite buckled before. It has settled down a bit now, but it's just a feature of the paper. When I am doing a normal painting, I would stretch the paper afterwards. There is actually a YouTube video on my YouTube channel that talks about how to stretch paper, but I don't think you can really stretch it in a book, and it doesn't matter anyway, but I just don't want you to be too concerned about that. All right, now I think I'm going to start. This has got so much cerulean in it, but look, you know, for me, this one is in shadow anyway. So it's probably might turn out to be a little bit darker than the others, but that's okay. So I'm just going to go over the top with that, that mix of, so I said French ultramarine, Windsor yellow, and I have also mixed in some burnt sienna. Oh, that's really nice. I like that colour. I think the cerulean does tend to granulate a lot more than the others, but it really does give you a nice texture on these leaves. The thing is, when you're using a few layers, is it's difficult to get clean edges. So I would prefer to probably just do one coat. Now I'm just doing some brush strokes kind of in the direction of the veins. Okay, I'm going to leave that now for the moment and move on to the next one with a coat of this darker sort of bluey mix. I have to say, compared to my usual style, which is quite exacting, this is quite freeing and liberating. It's a nice feeling not to be too worried about how it's going to turn out. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. Okay, and I'll move on to the other one. Okay, and again, I don't want to go back into the wet areas because that's when you can really mess it up. So I think that's looking pretty good. Again, I'm going to have to let that dry. I think what I'll do next is I'll add in the veins and we'll do the stem, and I can decide later what I want to do with those leaves in the background. So I'll just let that dry for now. Okay, that's all dry now. I'm going to pop in the midrib. So I'm using Windsor lemon this time, mixed with a little tiny bit of French ultramarine. So, and I've changed to a smaller brush. This is a 0, has a pretty good point. It's probably the main thing. Okay, and I'm just going to pop that up. So the yellow, it's quite a pale lemony colour, kind of goes part way up here. So I'll just, we'll be putting another colour over the top anyway, which has sort of yellow underneath. So it's okay to continue that up there. Okay. Okay, so that's the midrib. You can see the veins, quite a lot of these little veins are apparent. You can't see every detail, but you know, they're definitely there. The other thing that I love is this little red edge. See, there's an edge here that's quite red, the same as the colour on the stems here. And also, so here there's a little bit of red. So, you know, there's a bit of variation. It's almost a pinky colour here on this one. So you can sort of pop it in here and there. And yeah, that'll make a nice little contrast. So for that reddish colour, there's definitely, I'm seeing some burnt sienna in there. But I think also I could use a little bit of permanent rose. And then to darken that up, I'd probably add some French ultramarine. So I'll get on to that. So because I used that yellow before, I'm just going to pop some yellow, and I did have a bit of burnt sienna on my brush, so that's still there. I'm just going to pop that up the rest of this stem here. Okay, and I've mixed up a little bit of burnt sienna with some permanent rose. And if I drop that in where that's wet, that will spread a little bit anyway in places. That kind of does a bit of the work for you. All right, so here, okay, I'm going to take that reddish colour and take it down the side of this leaf. Okay, while I'm down here, I'll add a bit of that red. Very pretty. Quite a lot of permanent rose in this red, I think. Okay, take that back up there. I might do this, put some of this red down into the mid rib. So this whole section here, I'm going to put some of the burnt sienna permanent rose mix over the top and take that down. I'm just to drop in a little bit more permanent rose while that's wet, and that'll spread out a little bit there. And the other thing about having paint so wet is, like here, it formed a little bit of a hard edge. So this has happened over here. And it can be quite a nice effect if you're, you know, working on something kind of sketchy like this. But I'm just going to add a little bit more of that red as well. And just suggest, you know, it's a sort of a little bit dotty, the red in there. Again, I'm trying to tell myself not to fiddle too much here. I'm going to add a bit more red to the top. Actually does kind of fade out a bit. I'll put a bit down there. And definitely want to have some red down here. And you can carry on and put as much on as you want, really. I'm just not going to spend too much time on this because I don't want this to be too onerous. Okay, I think that's okay for kind of, you know, sketchy. Although I'll just perhaps put a little bit of a darker, so there is a bit of green there, and I'll just darken it up on that side a bit. Now, for these veins here, I'm going to mix in, I'm going to try some titanium white mixed with a little bit of Windsor lemon. All right. The problem when you're using white is that when you put it on, it looks nice and bright, but then it goes darker. So it's a bit tricky, and these are still quite light, so we may have a bit of trouble actually seeing this, but we'll see how we go. The other thing is, this brush is not bad, but I don't know how it's going to go with this, so we'll just see. So I just want to pop in. I'm going to just turn this around a tiny bit so it's easier for me to get these lines in. So I'll just pop a couple of these veins. So that looks pretty good to me, although I think as I said, the brush is probably a little bit thick. If I go with a really light touch, it's probably not too bad. Okay, so this is looking good at the moment, but we'll see what happens when it dries, whether that's sufficient. So I'm not putting in every vein, I'm just sort of popping in a suggestion. Now, there is a vein around the margin. It's quite obvious on these leaves, so I do want to put that in. Again, I don't have to put every single part of it, but I definitely want it to be shown on there. So try and go with a light touch. Doesn't really matter if you don't go with a light touch, you're just showing that you know that there's a vein there. Okay, and they don't seem necessarily to be opposite each other. They're in sort of all different directions, and there are little veins sort of going in between. I don't think I'm going to go to that much trouble, but and they're a bit wobbly. So yeah, I like that, but it has really faded quite a bit. So I'm using the titanium white. I may have been better off using the permanent white gouache, but look, I'll try again with a bit less lemon and a bit more white. We'll see how this side goes here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. The other thing is, even if you just wanted to use just white, and then if it comes out too bright, you could pop a little bit of green back over the top just to push it back a little bit. Okay, so once again, not being too pedantic, just also don't want to make them the same, like they don't have to be exactly the same width apart. Right. Yeah, I like this, it's good. All right, and another vein coming down the margin. Kind of varies how far it is from the edge of the leaf. There we go. And one more, and look, you know, well, then we're just about finished this. I am going to leave those for the moment. I might do a bit more work. I just don't want this video to go on for too long. I don't want you to lose interest. I might even draw in the veins so that it is a bit more obvious. Yeah, they can just be a different style, still showing what's happening. Okay. Okay, I'm pretty happy with those four sort of sketchy style leaves. They're not perfect. I don't want them to be perfect. Did I say that? All right, I'm just going to add, because so the other thing is that usually with botanical art, we have the light coming from the top left. So if there are going to be any shadows, they will usually be on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to darken that side of the leaf, of the stem, a little bit. I mean, you're not necessarily going to have a shadow on one side of the leaf. It just sort of depends, you know, which way they're facing. You know, you might have a cast shadow on this back one here, but for this purpose, don't worry about it. Okay, we can come back and touch up that a little bit later if we want to. Actually, sorry, one more thing that I would do. I did mention insect activity. There's always a little bit of stuff going on. There's some little, you know, just little dots here and there. Some of these are really tiny, so my brush has probably got too much paint on it. I'll get out. I've got this old brush that's hardly got any bristles left on it, but it's really good. It's a crappy old thing, but it is really good for little teeny tiny things like that. And you know, we've got a bit of something going on here, so I'll just pop that in. It just makes it look a bit more realistic. You know, so many of our gum trees have some kind of insect activity on them. There's a little bit coming in there. Yeah, and there's a bit sort of going on the stems as well. Okay, actually I've just realized here this was where something else had joined on, so this should have actually come down a little bit longer. Anyway, that's all good. Right, so what I might do now is paint this beautiful love heart shaped leaf, and the difference in the color is amazing. There's so much pink in there, just on that. It's a different on the other side, so that could be a challenge. I think I might start with the color that I used on the top here. Oh, but I have to draw it first. All right, I think I'm just going to go straight in with my 2H this time. I mean, you could even probably, let's try this. Let's just draw around it. So very pale, and obviously it's going to be a little bit bigger, but the variation in these leaves means it's fine for me to do this a millimetre larger than what it was. Okay, and down to the stem. Okay, and then go a nice sweeping curve up to the top there. That's lovely. All right, so because I've already done this in the 2H, I don't need to worry. I might draw these margins so that I've got something to follow here. Just trying to see what's really happening up there. So what is actually happening is where this meets another vein kind of goes in a bit and then it comes out again. So it's doing that. So that's kind of interesting. Then that's sort of going up there. Something else going that way. Some of these are opposite, but not all of them. That one's a bit higher there. You know, then there's some smaller ones in between. Okay, so that can sort of go in like that. Right. Okay. I'll go back to my French ultramarine and Windsor yellow and some burnt sienna. Fairy brown. Okay. It's quite murky really, especially with the red. So once again, I'll probably do 2 coats here. Actually, do you know what? I think I might add a bit of permanent rose into that. There's so much red here. It's just beautiful. So I'm going to add some red into that colour. So it's kind of like a dirty, greeny, purpley colour. Oh dear. We'll see how that goes. No, I think it needs more. I think it needs a couple of, I actually think it needs a couple of layers to get the green and the purple coming through. All right, so I will start with this bluey green. Okay, all of this is dry, so I'm not going to smudge it with my hand. The other thing that you can do is you can just put a piece of paper. I mean, I actually have this as just testing colours. You know, you can put that on your hand so that you don't ruin what you've done before, but I think this will be okay. If you're starting on this side and then moving to that side, sometimes you'll find that the oils in your hand change the way that the paint goes on the paper. All right, let's go. This is so pale. I think I'm just going to cover the whole thing. I'm not going to worry about the midrib because the midrib's darker anyway. The idea of leaving the midrib is if it's light, because usually, traditionally with botanical art, we try to use the white of the paper rather than white paint. So because this midrib is darker, a red anyway, I won't worry about leaving the midrib. I don't know how that's going to dry. I'm fiddling probably a little bit too much, but it's wet, so I'm just going to just touch that. So I'm just going to leave that now and we'll see what happens to it. Okay, now we need to have a look at we'll have a look at these buds, maybe these ones. Okay, I'm going to take this off here. I could have done a whole stem having all of the different parts on the same stem, but I kind of like this. It's, you know, the sketchbooky, like a little bit more scientific. Right, so I think I'm going to write the name up here. So I might use this section here to draw these. Okay, now it is tricky getting them coming from different angles. How will I do that? Okay, I might hold it like that. Hopefully not put too much shadow on the page. I'm just trying to avoid this wet area. Right. Okay, so I think I'll just do like these ones here. Now there's one coming down that I can see the side. That is by far the easiest angle. So I'm painting these at life size. You can also paint them a bit bigger, you know, 2 or 3 times the size if there's something in particular that you want to show that you don't think you're going to be able to see at this size. Okay, now I've got one coming out here. It's sort of coming, when they're coming towards us, you need to foreshorten it a little bit. So I'm sort of looking at the top of that one, then that'll have that underneath. There's another one coming out this side. And there's one behind. So really look at the shape, you know, they come to a bit of a point. There's a little line around here. And that one's going away. That's actually really a tricky angle. Okay, and that's coming from behind there. All right. So I have just sketched that roughly, but I might now just make it I'll just go, I've got a very sharp pencil, and now that I'm happy with all of that, I'll go over that a bit darker. You can also, I mean, really what I do is I research the plant as well. So there's plenty of resources available online, and of course I have quite a few different guidebooks that I look and see what they want to tell me about the plant as well. So so that you can sort of, you know exactly what you should be looking for. Right, okay, I'm happy with that, and I'll just give that a little once over with the kneadable eraser. And there's a bit of variation in the colouring again. So there's some beautiful like lemony green, but they come to a lovely rosy colour at the tip of the cap. I'll get this, I'm going to start with some lemon yellow, and I'm going to put that all over, because even where the rosy colour is, there is like a lemony colour underneath that. You know, you can sort of see the colours that are shining through. So because I have this lovely outline, I'm not really too worried about, you know, staying inside the lines. I mean, I am, but I would encourage you not to be. All right, we're going to have to let that dry now. So I'm just thinking I might draw another little flower here, same as this one. I'll just copy this one. and I might just add a little bit of colour to it. So I'll still draw those stamens in. They are very cute little flowers, but quite difficult to paint. And I'll use the brush for the stamens. Okay, now I'll just, because this is kneadable, I'm trying to get a little bit of a point onto it there, so I can just, I may as well just put that line back in. Okay, and I think I'll use the really fine brush and pop that lemony colour in there. Just make it a bit of a greeny colour. So the colour of the flower, just pull that back out again, and it's wet, so I don't want to put it on my paper. If you can see that up there. Yeah, so it's kind of a creamy colour. Another great thing that I have here is a magnifier with an LED light, so you can get it in a little bit closer. I'm just thinking those little anthers are sort of a brownish, greenish colour. Right, so I'll get that, the colour that I used here before, a bit of a lemony colour. I might just add a little bit of Windsor yellow and a little bit of permanent rose to kind of make a little bit more of a peachy, creamy colour. And I'm just going to just pop that on there. It's probably a little bit too dark, but there'll be some shadows right down in there. So to make shadows, I usually actually use a burnt sienna and French ultramarine, which can give me a nice sort of grey colour. It does depend what I'm doing really, and you just got to take it pretty easy with the colour, with the shadows. Okay, that's probably too intense, but anyway, you kind of get the idea. And then I'll just make it a little more brown and pop on some anthers. Okay. I would probably go to a little bit more trouble, make these a little more subtle if I was doing them on a real painting. But I think that's pretty cute. Right, so these will definitely be dry now. So I'm going to go to my really teeny tiny brush. I'm going to get a little bit of permanent rose and just pop these back up here. Then I'll just put that on the tips. Look, that's really wet. There, see, it's not too intense if you just put a little covering. You can still, because they're not really bright pink. So I mean, I hope you can see this properly, because I'm realizing that there's they're pretty tiny. I might just zoom in a little bit. I think this is looking a little bit messy and a bit of a dog's breakfast, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. I've mixed up a little bit more permanent rose, burnt sienna, and a touch of French ultramarine to make a nice dark red. This still could be a little bit wet as well, but I'm just going to give this a go. I think we need an edge on there. It's a little bit wobbly, which is great. Probably varies a little bit in its intensity there, and the width of the line. So I'll just follow that around. I don't want to spend any more time on it because I keep harping on about how it doesn't matter. So I'll put my money where my mouth is. Okay, nice and dark around this side. Quite heavy at the bottom, so we'll do that, and yeah, a bit darker down this side perhaps. That whole thing is quite dark. Again, I'm not too worried about making the ends look pretty. All right, now all of those lines that I drew in before, I can't really see. And now, yeah, so I can't really see those lines. I can see that center one. So I'm just going to take this up. It does get pretty narrow, so just be careful about that. There we are, but it's nice and wide at the bottom. Once you start putting in some lines, it kind of can just make it look more complete. Takes your eye away from the areas that you're not so happy with. Okay, so because I don't have those lines, I'm just gonna kind of guess where that was going. And they're not all dark. So again, a little bit of variation. Okay. There we go, that's starting to come together. Right, so there was a bit of a margin around there. Right. That is like super, super dark down the bottom, down here. So I'll just darken that up a bit there. And now the other thing that I noticed here is there's lots of little splotches. So I might pop a couple of those in as well. They're kind of purple. They're pretty subtle, so it can be quite a watery paint. And I think I'll just, you know, pop a few of those here and there. We've got a bit going on here as well. All sorts of things. You don't want to make it look too ugly, but you know, it's happening, so let's include it. Okay, I think this is pretty close to finished. You can fiddle with this as much as you want. This is a good basis to refer to if you decide to do another painting. Now, I'm calling this a sketchbook. I am aware that there's a lot of people doing nature journaling. I probably this is probably verging on nature journaling, but a lot of people do a lot of writing in their books for nature journaling. And you could certainly, from my perspective, I would like to see, you know, some descriptions, you know, sizes, what the tree looked like. We haven't included the bark. The bark is so big it's a bit hard to, and it's very variable. You could have actually drawn a little tree in here to show the habit. And yeah, and then a lot of people write about their observations, what else they've noticed in the area, what they might be feeling. I think nature journaling is a little separate to what I'm doing here. Okay, but what I would do now to finish this is I will write the species, especially if I know what it is, and I will just sign it. Okay, so I'm just going to write the species across the top here. So Eucalyptus, polyanthemos, which is red box. And actually I will write the date. And what is the date? I think it's the 9th of the 9th. Okay, and I'll just do a little signature down here, which is not my real signature, but that'll do for here. And that's probably enough for now. I hope that you've enjoyed this session, and I hope that I have managed to get across that we weren't painting a masterpiece, we were learning about this particular plant. So if you can find a red box in your area, grab some pieces and paint along. If you've got any questions, please feel free to get in contact with me. You can write in the comments below, or you can contact me through social media or through my website, cherylhodges.com. I do have a couple of longer tutorials which are more about creating a masterpiece with a lot more detail about the things that I use and my processes. And you can find the links to those in the workshops page of my website. But look, I really just want you to get out, enjoy nature, learn a bit, and enjoy the process. Happy painting.